Disclaimer: this story contains mature themes intended for adult viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. The zipper caught halfway up my back, and no matter how I twisted my arm, it wouldn't budge. I sighed in frustration, glancing at my reflection, the soft light from the vanity outlining the curve of my shoulder and the open back of my dress. Just then, I heard his footsteps approaching behind me. "Need help?" His voice came from the doorway, calm, steady, but with a hint of hesitation. I froze for a moment before replying, "Yeah. I can't reach the zipper." He stepped closer, and I caught his reflection moving up behind mine in the mirror, taller, broader, his presence filling the small room. I could feel the warmth of him even before his fingers brushed against my skin. The first touch was barely there, just his knuckles grazing my back as he reached for the zipper. But it sent a quiet shiver through me, a reaction I tried to hide by pretending to fix my hair. The sound of the zipper sliding upward broke the silence, slow and deliberate. Halfway up, he paused, maybe by accident, maybe not. My breath hitched. Our eyes met in the mirror for a fleeting second that felt too long. His fingers lingered, the warmth of his touch staying against my spine as if he'd forgotten to let go. "Got it," he murmured, his voice lower now. But he didn't move away. For a moment, neither of us did. The air between us thickened with something unspoken, not wrong, but not innocent either. I turned slightly, my shoulder brushing his chest. "Thanks," I whispered, trying to sound casual. But my pulse betrayed me, fast, uneven. He gave a small nod, his eyes flickering to my lips before he quickly stepped back. I smiled faintly, pretending not to notice how his hands trembled as he tucked them into his pockets. And just when the air started to clear, my phone buzzed on the dresser, a name flashing on the screen that made both of us look. The tension cracked like a secret caught mid-breath. I turned to face him fully, the question hanging between us unspoken. But before I could say a word, he said quietly, "You should get that." My heart was still racing as I reached for the phone, and in that charged silence, I couldn't tell if it was from nerves or something else entirely. She didn't answer the call. She couldn't, not with her heart still unsteady and her thoughts tangled somewhere between confusion and something she refused to name. The phone kept vibrating until it finally stopped, leaving only the faint hum of silence and the sound of her own uneven breathing. He was still there, standing near the door, pretending to check a message, but she knew he wasn't reading anything. His shoulders were tense, his jaw clenched, like he was trying to hold himself together. They hadn't always been this way, awkward, uncertain, caught in a space that neither of them understood. A year ago, things were simple. He was quiet, respectful, always keeping a careful distance. And she was the one who reminded him to eat, who asked about his classes, who smiled at how shy he used to be around her. But something had changed over the months. Maybe it was the late-night talks in the kitchen, when everyone else was asleep. Maybe it was the way he started looking at her, like he saw something past her usual calm, like he understood the loneliness she never spoke of. Her marriage had already been fading before he even entered the picture. Her husband was more of a guest than a partner now, always away, always distant, his words short and his eyes colder each day. She used to wait up for him, dinner ready, heart hopeful. But slowly, she stopped expecting warmth from someone who'd long stopped noticing her. And that's when he started noticing. It began with small things, offering to fix something around the house, waiting to make sure she got home safe, asking if she'd eaten when she forgot to. Those gestures that seemed simple but carried quiet care. She knew she shouldn't have looked forward to them, but she did. And tonight, when his hands brushed her skin, every buried feeling seemed to come rushing back. "Sorry," he said finally, his voice breaking through her thoughts. "Didn't mean to make things weird." She smiled faintly, forcing a small laugh. "You didn't. I just wasn't expecting," she trailed off, searching for words that wouldn't sound too honest. He looked at her then, really looked, eyes soft, searching, afraid to linger but unable to look away. "You look beautiful," he said quietly. The words hit her harder than they should have. Maybe because no one had said that to her in a long time. She wanted to say thank you, or don't, or anything that could break the tension. But the truth sat heavy in her chest, she didn't want to break it. A distant sound, a car pulling up outside, snapped them both out of the moment. She turned to the mirror, pretending to fix her hair again, her reflection betraying the flush on her cheeks. "Behind her," he said softly, "he's home." And in that instant, the air between them turned into a secret neither of them could take back. Dinner that night felt longer than usual. The clinking of silverware and the quiet hum of the TV filled the silence that none of them wanted to break. She sat across the table, pretending to listen as her husband talked about his trip, his words sharp and businesslike, the kind that didn't leave room for emotion. Her stepson barely said a word. His fork moved absently, eyes fixed on his plate, though every now and then, she could feel his gaze flicker toward her. Each time it did, she looked away, but her pulse always betrayed her calm. The scent of cologne lingered faintly on her dress, the same one he had helped zip earlier. Every time she moved, she could feel the memory of his hands still there, that soft, uncertain touch that had burned into her skin. When her husband excused himself to take a call, the quiet that followed was deafening. She reached for her glass, her fingers trembling slightly, and caught him looking again. This time, he didn't glance away. "Something wrong?" she asked, voice low. He shook his head, but his jaw tightened. "Just wondering, why you dressed up tonight?" The question hung in the air, bold, almost accusing. Her breath caught. "It's just dinner," she replied, though her tone didn't sound convincing even to her own ears. He leaned back, his expression unreadable, but his voice softened. "You didn't dress like that for him before." Her heart skipped. The way he said it, not angry, but hurt, made her chest ache. "You shouldn't say things like that," she whispered, glancing toward the hallway where her husband's voice still echoed faintly on the phone. He smiled faintly, but it wasn't playful this time. "Then maybe stop making me think them." The silence that followed was too heavy, too charged. She wanted to tell him to stop, to remind him of lines that shouldn't be crossed, but her lips parted and no words came out. From the corner of her eye, she saw her husband's shadow moving back toward the room. She quickly looked down, pretending to fix her napkin. Their eyes met once more, brief and burning, a single moment that said everything they couldn't. And just as the footsteps neared, he whispered so only she could hear, "You don't have to keep pretending." Her heart slammed in her chest. She didn't know if it was fear, or something far more dangerous. The house was quiet that night, too quiet. Rain tapped softly against the windows, the kind of steady rhythm that made every sound feel louder, every breath feel closer. She had stayed up late in the living room, pretending to read, but her eyes hadn't moved past the same paragraph in nearly an hour. Her husband had gone to bed early after another short argument about nothing in particular. Lately, it always ended the same silence, distance, and that cold space between them that no amount of patience could fill. When she heard footsteps coming down the stairs, she didn't need to look to know who it was. He appeared at the edge of the room, wearing a loose t-shirt, his hair still damp from a shower. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked softly. He shook his head. "You neither?" She smiled faintly. "Guess not." For a while, they just sat there, him on the far end of the couch, her pretending to read again. The air felt different now. The rain outside, the dim glow of the lamp, the quiet that pressed between heartbeats, it all made the room feel smaller. When she set the book down, her hand brushed against his. It was accidental, but neither of them moved. For a long moment, they just stared at where their fingers met, barely touching, but enough to feel a pulse that wasn't their own. He turned slightly toward her, his voice low. You ever wonder what it would be like if things were different? Her breath caught. Don't, she whispered. But he kept looking at her, and the look in his eyes made her chest tighten, not just with guilt, but with longing she had tried too hard to ignore. The thunder rolled outside, deep and distant, as if echoing everything unsaid between them. She stood quickly, trying to pull away from the moment, but he reached out gently, not to stop her, just to make her pause. His hand lingered for a second against her wrist, warm and trembling. I should go, she said quietly, her voice barely holding steady. He nodded, but didn't move his hand. Their eyes locked, the kind of stare that says if you stay, everything changes. And then, from upstairs, a sudden sound, a door creaking open. She froze. He did too. The next morning arrived heavy with silence, that kind of uneasy quiet that carries the weight of everything left unsaid. The rain had stopped, but the clouds still hung low, gray and swollen. She moved through the kitchen slowly, her mind replaying the night before, the touch, the look, the words she shouldn't have heard but couldn't forget. He was already there, standing by the window with a mug in hand, staring out at the drenched garden. When he turned around, their eyes met, and instantly, that same tension filled the space again, uninvited but undeniable. Couldn't sleep much, he said quietly. Neither could I, she admitted, keeping her voice soft. There was a moment, one of those fragile pauses where the world feels like it's holding its breath. She wanted to step away, to escape the way his gaze lingered, but before she could move, the sound of a door slamming upstairs made them both flinch. Her husband's voice followed, angry, sharp, echoing down the staircase. So this is what's been going on? Her heart dropped. He was holding her phone, the screen lit with messages she thought had been deleted. Messages that were never supposed to be read. It wasn't what it looked like, but it looked bad enough. The late-night texts. The brief check-ins. The ones that said, "Are you okay?" and "Don't stay up alone." Innocent words that carried feelings neither had dared to name. Tell me, is this why you've been distant? Her husband demanded, his voice cracking under anger and disbelief. She froze, tears stinging her eyes. No, it's not like that. But her stepson stepped forward, his expression calm but steady. It's my fault, he said, voice firm. I was just worried about her. That's all. Her husband's glare shifted toward him. Worried? Or something else? The air was thick with tension, shame, fear, heartbreak all colliding in one suffocating moment. No, she whispered, shaking her head. You don't understand. I understand enough, he snapped, setting the phone down hard on the table. You've been gone long before this. Her chest ached at the words, not just from accusation, but from truth. Because deep down, she had been gone, lost in a loneliness she tried too long to hide. Her stepson's voice cut through the silence, soft but certain. If you're going to blame someone, blame me. But don't talk to her like that. The words hit like lightning, defiant, protective, too raw to take back. Her husband stared at him, eyes narrowing, realization dawning like fire. Get out, he hissed. The young man's jaw tightened, but he didn't move. Instead, he looked at her, just once, eyes full of everything he couldn't say. And then, without another word, he walked out into the rain. She stood there trembling, torn between guilt and something that felt dangerously close to heartbreak. The door shut behind him, a soft, final, echoing louder than any storm. The rain didn't stop all day. It kept falling in steady sheets, blurring the garden outside and washing the world into shades of gray. Inside, the silence stretched like a wound that refused to close. She sat by the window, watching the drops race down the glass. Every sound, the ticking clock, the creak of the house, the echo of that door closing behind him, felt heavier than words. Her husband hadn't said much since the morning. He stayed locked in his study, the sound of drawers opening and closing the only sign he was still there. When he finally came out, his face was drawn and tired, anger drained into quiet resignation. "I've booked a flight," he said simply. "I'll be gone for a while. Maybe it's better that way." She looked up, her throat tight. "You don't have to," he cut her off gently. "No. Maybe I do. I think we both know this hasn't been working for a long time." His words weren't cruel, they were tired, almost kind in a way that hurt even more. She wanted to argue, to deny what they both knew, but there was no point. The truth hung there between them, fragile and real. As he turned to leave, she said softly, "It was never what you think." He paused at the door, his voice low. "Maybe not. But it became something you couldn't hide anymore." Then he was gone, the sound of the front door closing echoing through the empty hall like the end of something that once mattered. The hours that followed blurred together, the rain, the quiet, the emptiness of the house. She should have felt relief, but instead there was only an ache that grew heavier with every passing minute. By late afternoon, she couldn't take it anymore. She grabbed her coat and stepped outside, the rain soaking through in seconds. The cold air hit her skin, sharp and real. She followed the road out toward the old path behind the garden, the one that led to the small shed where he sometimes went to fix things. And there he was, sitting on the porch steps, drenched but still, lost in thought. He looked up when she approached, surprise flashing in his eyes. "You shouldn't be out here." "I had to," she said, breathless. "You can't just disappear like that." He stood slowly, water dripping from his hair, his expression torn between guilt and something softer. "I didn't want to make it worse." She shook her head. "You didn't. It was already broken. We just stopped pretending." For a moment, neither spoke. The rain fell around them, steady and relentless, washing away the silence. He took a small step closer, voice trembling. "So what happens now?" Her answer came in a whisper, barely carried by the rain. "I don't know. But I don't want to keep running from what's real anymore." And as the storm quieted into a soft drizzle, the distance between them finally disappeared, not in a rush, but in quiet understanding. The rain had stopped by the time the sky began to clear, streaks of soft orange and pink bleeding through the heavy clouds. The storm had passed, but its echo still lingered in the air, the smell of wet earth, the cool breeze that brushed gently through the quiet garden. They stood there in the aftermath, silent but close. The world felt still for the first time in days. He glanced at her, uncertain. "You're going to catch a cold," he murmured, his voice quiet but full of care. She smiled faintly, brushing a strand of damp hair from her face. "I've been through worse." For a while, neither spoke. There was no need to, the quiet said enough. After everything, the anger, the guilt, the heartbreak, there was something simple and pure in just being there. She turned toward him, her expression softer than before. "You didn't have to stand by me through all that," she said gently. "But you did." He shook his head. "I couldn't just walk away." Her eyes met his, steady and warm. "You could have. Most people would have." He took a slow breath, his voice trembling slightly. "Maybe. But I didn't want to be like everyone else." The honesty in his tone caught her off guard, not bold, not reckless, just real. The kind of truth that comes after everything has already been broken and rebuilt. A small laugh escaped her, mixed with relief. "You have no idea how much that means." He smiled, the kind that reached his eyes, the kind she hadn't seen in a long time. "Then maybe we start over," he said softly. "No secrets. No pretending. Just us as we are." She looked up at him, the fading light tracing the lines of his face, the quiet sincerity in his gaze, and for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel guilty for smiling. "Maybe we do," she whispered. The wind picked up slightly, carrying the scent of rain and renewal. As they stood side by side, the world around them felt washed clean, not perfect, not certain, but honest. He reached out, his hand finding hers. Their fingers intertwined naturally, like something that had been waiting to happen all along. And in that moment, no words, no apologies, no fear, just connection. Quiet, real, and warm. The camera would have lingered on their hands, the soft glow of twilight reflecting off the wet porch, the gentle breeze moving through the trees. A story that began in silence now ended in peace, not a grand confession, but the quiet promise of something lasting.